Good morning, this is Tony van Niekerk from Cover Magazine. I'm sitting with Ian Middleton, CEO of Masthead. Ian, thank you so much for spending a bit of time with us. We were with you on your masterclass yesterday, and very interesting to hear about the regulatory changes, a bit of a different take that we had there, but I think overall very positively received by your members that were there and so on, which bodes very well for us for the future. Ian, you were part of the Masthead launch 10 years ago, and I remember the excitement about the whole thing. How would you describe the difference between the Masthead when you were part of the launch and the current business?
Well, firstly, Tony, thank you for the invite, and it's great to be with you. I think if we look back 10 years, then the first thing is we exclusively worked with IFAs at that stage, and today we're working with a number of tied agents as well. So that's the first difference. The second thing is we had a much more limited value proposition. But perhaps most importantly, if we think back, we were moving into completely uncharted territory. We were moving in and starting to help IFAs deal with a world that was completely different for them. They were moving into from an unregulated world into a regulated world. And in fact, the regulators were moving into a regulated world versus unregulated world from a market conduct perspective. So to an extent, while we had a look at what had happened in the UK 10 or 15 years prior to that, and in Australia a few years prior to that, we were partly learning as we were going along. So the Masthead today has a completely different set of propositions to advisors. We're very clear as to what we want to achieve. We've got a much better handle on what the environment is, where it's going. I think the regulators also have a clearer vision as to where they want to take it. And in that respect, we can respond and be relevant to IFAs today.
Great. Ian, I know Masthead is not just about financial planning, but obviously includes the short-term side as well. But maybe just your, from a focused perspective, the landscape of financial planning then and now.
Yeah.
What are sort of the main highlighted differences for you?
I think the first word that comes to mind is it's more professional today. I think the fact that people have needed to be licensed has focused their mind on it. It's put them into a different bracket. When you need to go through some steps in order to get your license to operate, then I think it focuses the mind. Because if we think back 10 years and a few weeks back, then literally you could be selling second-hand cars one day and you could be calling yourself an executive financial planner the next day. And there was no need to be licensed, there was no competency you needed to confirm, there was no set of ethics you needed to comply with or anything to that effect. Having to go through certain steps, I think makes people more professional then. And I think the requirements that the regulations have put in play and the influence that has come from foreign jurisdictions like the UK, and the fact that consumers are much more aware, I think has made people focus on process and advice process, whether it's a short-term world or a long-term world, or whether it's an investment world. So I think professionalism is the single biggest thing for me that's the difference today.
So what do you think was the catalyst for that move from where we were into a more professional environment?
I think a couple of things. I think the natural sort of progression and move internationally into more governance and regulation, because if one thinks back to sort of 15 years ago, 12 years ago, there have been some governance failures, companies that have folded as a result of governance failures, as a result of lack of regulation. I think the influence of the international markets and the fact that South Africa became more of an international player and being benchmarked by international counterparts. Then for me, the media. I think more exposure in the media, the highlighting of concerns in the media, the raising awareness, and if you want to take it to an extreme, then it's a case of more consumer activism, that people become more aware of what they're entitled to and what's fair and not fair. So today there's an enormous amount of disclosure and transparency that has been part of a journey, which started admittedly pre-phase. It started in about 2002, 2003 with policyholder protection rules, etc. But it was before market conduct. So I think the media, the international environment, and our own regulators want to be diligent regulators in this market conduct space were key drivers.
So So, based on the above, then what we said before, um, where do you think financial planners should be spending their energy and their focus to be able to fit into this new environment?
For me, the first thing is to take a longer term view, to take a business view. And that means making a decision, sitting down and taking stock of where one is and where one wants to go. Because if you don't know where you want to go at an objective point of view, and the corporates will talk about having a vision and a mission, and it doesn't need to be as rigid as that. But if you haven't got a firm idea as to where you want to go, then it's very difficult to plan and to execute in order to get there. So if financial advisors take a longer term view and they view their business and say, what do I have? What will customers want? And what are the needs that I need to respond to in terms of my customers? If you take that view, then you get to the position of saying, do I have a value proposition? What is my value proposition? And it's not the product I sell, it's the process I take people through. And it's going to be different things for different people. So if advisors are taking a view and say, I have a value proposition, I have a target market of customers that I want to work with, I map those two together and I start thinking about how I can effect payment or receive payment for my services, then you start putting processes and systems in place to ensure long-term sustainability and viability, which is very different from the process of simply trying to sell a product and get that done by the end of the week. So it is a longer-term focus.
Yes. And do you see the guys taking to it? Is it not just the really high net worth guys that are taking to that model?
No, funnily enough, I think as one sees younger people coming into the industry, and I know we often talk about the aging population of financial advisors, but when we see people coming in at the age of 30, 35, they tend to take a longer term view to start with. Particularly in the investment world, they start to look to build books and start to drive annuitized income. And annuitized income is starting to build a repeat revenue flow. It's starting to put systems in place to be able to see customers on a repeat basis, review their portfolios and work with them over a period of time. The high net worth may be easier if people are working that market, but the principles are equally applicable to high net worth as people work in the entry level market. The difficulty probably comes in with customers and customers' ability to pay for advice. And therefore I think there will continue to be various models, commission-based models and fee-based models. But if people are thinking about the longer-term view, then they can put systems in place that can enable them to get there. We have a large portion of the population that doesn't receive ongoing financial advice. And often people are trying to move up the LSM ladder from an advisor point of view, and they neglect that part. I think part of that is being able to adjust your business model and say, to what extent can I go and service that market, but in a way that's efficient and I can still make money out of it? Because at the end of the day, we're not looking at charity. We're looking at a business, and the business needs to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about a longer term view. From your own perspective, how do you see this pan out over the next 5 or so years?
I think from a regulatory perspective, we've already seen the regulators talking about a more principle-based approach to regulation. And one of the ways I heard it described the other day through the Financial Services Board was to say that it's more difficult to duck and dive a principle than it is to duck and dive a rule. So I think we can expect to see more principles coming through. TCF is an example of that. I think we can see as well, the way the regulators have already spoken, that they are going to be a lot more intrusive and invasive in their supervisory practices. And I think the natural extension or follow on from that is we can see, like we've seen in the UK and Australia, I think we can see sanctions and penalties significantly higher. So that from a regulatory perspective, it's a journey. And to that extent, the consumer sits at the center of that particular journey. So principle-based, a lot more intrusive, and from a penalty point of view, I think we can see significantly more penalties flowing through. One simply needs to look at what the Competition Commission has done and what the Reserve Bank has done in relation to FICA-related offences.
Mm.
If one moves to the advisor side of things, then I think we're going to see people in the advisory space looking at their practices more as businesses rather than simply transactional sales practices, and I need to go and sell a policy or put an investment in place to be able to move forward. They're going to have to work in a regulatory environment that is ever changing. But advisors are resilient, and they change and adapt. And if they take an approach that says, number one, I want to be in for the longer haul. I want to be in for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. I want to build a business that has value, and I have a proposition that I can articulate. Then I think the thing on advisors is about having the right support structures in place. And whether you have critical mass to build it yourself inside your own business, or whether you decide that that's my core business, that's what I'm going to do, and effectively I'm going to outsource the rest, it's a decision that one needs to take. So from an advisory perspective, there may be fallout. But I think one of the things we will see is, if you want to call it polarization, you're going to see a distinction between a tied advisor, very clearly identified and defined as a tied advisor, and you're going to see independent financial advisors, and customers are going to be able to understand exactly who provides what, and they're going to make their choices as to who they want to deal with.
I think it's very exciting because with us having still 80% of our population underserved, the opportunities are massive if we can get the model right.
I think they are massive. And what adds to that, people often do a comparison between the need for financial advice in this country compared to other countries. The one thing we don't have, we know that people are undersaved. We know that there's a shortfall at retirement. We know that people don't have enough life cover. And in other countries, there's some similarities. The difference between an Australian environment and a UK environment and a US environment is that they have fairly bulky social security systems in place. You reach retirement and there's a government social security system that is significantly better than ours. So the need for financial advice is so much more here. And to that extent, as you say, one needs to get to the broader section of the population. There's absolutely a need for advice. And I have no doubt in my mind that it's face-to-face advice that will get those people on the right path, as opposed to the direct models or the do-it-yourself models. People don't wake up and decide, today I'm going to do my financial plan. They need someone to prompt them to do that.
Follow up. Ian, thank you very much. And obviously we know Masthead fits perfectly into this new environment and a new model. So we wish you good luck with effecting those changes.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you very much.